Hello everyone, my name is Solomon Eloa and this is my assignment 4 for Social Work 302 Research in Context theme course. For this assignment, I'll be developing a research proposal and my topic is focused on the impact of stigma among people living with HIV in Canada. I decided to broaden my topic simply because for my assignment 3, I kind of narrowed it down to the impact of stigma related to HIV awareness, prevention, and care among the ACP communities. And that assignment made me realize that aside from looking at it from the anti-oppressive perspective, looking at the things that ACB community members go through, I have to actually now use that unit of research that has been carried out by other people to look at it from the grand scheme of things, look at it more holistically, and look at it from with a generalist perspective, because it's easy for me to actually point out things from an anti-oppressive perspective when it comes to members of the ACB community, because obviously I identify as a Black person, I identify as an African, so there would be some level of unconscious bias in whatever research I would want to carry out. But I also understood from carrying out that literature review that some of the things that I would actually call oppressive were not really a systemic oppression with regards to ethnicity or race or skin color. They were just internalized oppression among the ACB communities themselves. So this assignment would actually focus on everyone regardless of social location, highlighting the impact of the stigma that has to do with the disease regardless of your social location. So it's going to be broad based, and the essence of having this research is to actually understand where we as society has failed people and what we can do better to actually improve the mental health and general well-being of people with lived experiences, at the same time informing ourselves about how to create awareness, how to prevent, and the care for people living with HIV/AIDS. I hope you enjoy my presentation, and please leave me any questions you may have at the end of the presentation. Enjoy. For my research questions and rationale, I probably want to start with my research questions. I have about 5 of them. The first one would probably be how can we create more awareness about the prevention, treatment, and care of HIV and use that to reduce stigma? Now, the rationale behind that question is basically from the experiences that I have had during the practicum and from my literature review and all the interaction that I've had, this research is supposed to actually find out how we could actually educate other people. Because if I take myself out of social work, I'm just like every other person that walks the streets, and I may not know as much as I know. The only reason why I want to believe that I know as much is just because I am taking this course. But there's many of us that do not even take social workers or even go into any of the human services, let alone understand as much as people in academics currently know. So, taking that into consideration, how could we create awareness to these people to let them understand that there are new ways or there are new treatments or there are new prevention methods and there are new ways of caring for people impacted by HIV. I think part of the reason why certain people still have that bias or that stigma is because they do not know enough. Prior to going into social work, I think my knowledge was just capped at knowing that HIV had no cure. But upon um, communication and more studies, I've come to realize that we've gotten to a stage where the antiretroviral drugs that people affected by HIV take could actually reduce the viral load of somebody living with HIV to the point where they cannot infect somebody that has no HIV. Now, that's something that I came across as if by virtue of going into studies. Not everybody knows that. So that's one of the questions I would want to find out. The second question I want to find out is, how does stigma against people with lived experiences, how does it affect their physical and mental well-being? It's something that we also have to look at, because stigma affects people differently, and it could progress into either physiological illness or mental illness. We would want to use this research to actually find out how these stigmas could actually progress or actually affect or impact negatively the health and mental well-being of people with lived experiences of HIV/AIDS. I would also want to find out, what role does the immediate environment play in the lives of people living with HIV? So people interact with their environment differently and at different levels. I would want to understand, by virtue of this research, how this relationship between people with lived experiences and their immediate environment, how it affects them, either positively or negatively. I think the fourth question I would want to ask is, how can service providers improve the social determinants of health among people impacted by HIV? Because when it comes to HIV, service providers are the first point of contact when it comes to care and treatment. Even from the stage of detection, they begin to people with lived experiences are in contact with service providers for either counseling, treatment, or even evaluation. So, how can we determine, how can we see the roles that these people can play in the lives of people impacted with HIV/AIDS? Because the way you present yourself, like, if take example, I do not know anything about HIV, and I go for my HIV test randomly, and I realize I was HIV positive, the first thing I would do naturally is to freak out, or just be very worried. And then I go to a health practitioner who I would assume should know better, and they also, like, maybe project my fears. So I would want to understand how the roles service providers would actually play when it comes to um, being the frontliners, being the first point of contact for people with lived experiences. And I think my final question would want to be, are the stigma that would be, I think I would probably want to phrase the question as, the stigma faced by people with lived experiences, are they based on their social location? That's in terms of race, ethnicity, skin color, accent, cultural background, ethnic background, or is it as a result of a general bias or ignorance from people who have no knowledge about HIV? So this is coming from a generalist perspective. When I did my literature review, I was able to highlight some of the experiences of people in the ACP community, and it is easy for me to relate with that, because, like I said earlier, I also identify as somebody from the ACP community. But from the general perspective, are these stigmas a function of internalized stigma, or is it as a function of the biased people that do not know about HIV? Are they just a projection? We would want to find out from this research. Thank you. For my theoretical orientation, I am hinging onto three major theories: the systems theories, the ecological theory, and the empowerment theory. And this is simply because I have decided to broaden my research proposal, unlike when I did my assignment 3, where I was focused on the anti-oppressive theory, because I was working with the ACB community. The limitation of one demography does not play in my research proposal, because regardless of social location, people with lived experiences of HIV go through the same level of stigma, looking at it from a generalist approach. The systems theory would benefit my research proposal, because it would enable me identify issues from a more generalist perspective rather than focus on one problem. The systems theory would help me identify or assess the intersectionality of problems. So the focus for my research proposal is stigmatizing people impacted by HIV. If I'm going to use the systems theory, I would look at how it affects them from the social system, their family. How do they get support from their family if they do? What is the family or communal perception about HIV? What what is the level of acceptance for the care for people impacted by HIV. Looking at it from the economic system, what are the economic barrier that people impacted by HIV face? Some people cannot get jobs just because by the time they undergo medicals, some organizations might not want to employ them just because they tested positive for HIV. Looking at it even from the legislative perspective, I don't think there are enough legislations that actually checks service providers when they are biased towards people impacted by HIV. The systems theory helps me look at those items and help identify or bring about solutions that can work. From the book by Zastro and Hennesor in 2020, my understanding of the ecological theory is um, I would describe it as a byproduct of the systems theory simply because the ecological theory explains the interaction between an individual and their environment. And by environment, I'll probably want to say it could either be your physical environment or your social environment. Physical environment, it's um literally where somebody is placed, so where you live, your family, your immediate community, the society around you, the school you go to, your social events or social gathering you go to, the church, mosque, or whatever gatherings you can associate yourself with based on your present location. While your social environment talks about your demography, your ethnicity, your race, your belief system, and whatnot. Um, so all of this put in context of my research proposal, I hope to understand how the interaction between an individual impacted by HIV um, goes with the environment around them. That being said, I would want to understand what is the perceived knowledge of HIV among the environment. Could the stigmatization be coming as a result of the communal response to the ideology of HIV? An article I had read by Django et al. In 2021 had actually highlighted that some religious leaders had actually attributed STDs as a punishment for sexual immorality. So, a person in that kind of environment would be very ashamed to actually speak about their HIV status, let alone go out to request for care or support from their immediate environment. So, that's an example of how much the ecological theory would help in my research proposal. Finally, the empowerment theory, which I think is very crucial to my data collection because I'll be working with respondents. Um, it uses intervention methods to help people self-actualize because while I would be collecting data, I would want to hear from people who have been directly impacted by stigma, and they need to actually be masters in their own story. I wouldn't come as a professional to navigate their story for them because it's not my lived experience, it's theirs. So I would want to actually promote that self-actualization as guided by the ACSW Code of Ethics. I would want to help them not blame themselves because based on what I have learned about HIV from my practicum and from research, I understand that you could contract HIV from different means. So many of these people, they might not even know how they came across the disease, and yet they blame themselves, given the fact that they live in a society that already discriminates or that I would want to use the word carefully criminalizes STDs. They would use the moral compass to prejudge. So many of them already blame themselves. The empowerment theory would help me break that barrier. And from a textbook by Carol Langer and Cynthia Lee's 2014, she had listed the key concept of empowerment theory, and she listed self-efficacy, group consciousness, self-blame reduction, personal responsibility for change, and multifocal vision are some of the key concepts of empowerment theories. These are some of which I would want to have at the back of my mind as the researcher when um, being in contact with my respondents. My research design is qualitative. For sampling, I got most of my materials from the U of C library and Google Scholar. And for recruitment, I intend to contact HIV Edmonton to get all of my participants from there because HIV Edmonton has a more comprehensive list of respondents across all demography, which would fit my research proposal. For data collection, I would be using questionnaires that would be online, and then I would also carry out a survey seminar where it's going to be virtual just because of the problem of having to gather everyone in one place. It's going to be virtual, and I would have like an online questionnaire where people would respond, and I would just collect their answers online as well. For data analysis, I would actually group similar experiences or responses, and then I'll produce my results from the average response. In accessing rigor, my I'm highly dependent on my practicum network because they would facilitate giving me network or references to research bodies like HIV, Edmonton, and other research group that I would want to consult for my data analysis or even sampling. Um, I would also be highly dependent on the response of my participants simply because many of them might have carried out lots of surveys similar to mine and they might just not see the benefit of having to carry out all of this survey if nothing is done in the long run. My intention is to use all of these networks to reach out to them and get as much response positively as possible. For strengths, I would probably say my biggest strength is the fact that I had done my first part of my practicum at an organization that focused on health inequities among people with HIV lived experience. So that gave me a leverage to actually access some of their materials and also ask questions from other like senior professionals and colleagues. Um, it also gave me that insight on understanding how to like facilitate online surveys with participants, and that would bring me to my limitation. The only limitation I think I would probably have is facilitating those participants for my survey because while I was a practicum student with the organization, the project was sponsored by the Public Health of Canada, which means participants got honorarium that were monetary. For me to carry out this or invite them to my survey, I would probably have to either figure out the financial part of it, or I don't know how I'm going to get it. So my biggest constraint is having to get them for my own research. For ethical consideration, I would want to remind myself as a prospective social worker and that the the respondents I'll be working with, given the sensitivity of the topic I'm working with, I would have to reassure them that whatever information they would give to me during the survey or during whatever interaction would be held in utmost confidentiality. I would also want to treat them with dignity and respect, regardless of their age, their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, their social class, their ability or disability. Something else I would also want to put into consideration for my research proposal is the need for guidance from a professional social worker because as a social work student, I would not want to assume that I have all it takes to successfully facilitate a seminar or a survey rather. I would need that guidance for evaluation purposes and also to kind of like get first-hand experience in how to successfully facilitate um, a community survey. And I think for information dissemination, the goal of this research is to actually help other service providers that are not in tune with the impact of stigmatization from people with lived experiences is to understand what this impact does to them and to remind us as service users that we are the first point of contact for service users. As professionals, we must always treat all of our service users with dignity and respect. We would be the gate point at which we either reassure them and give them that courage to self-actualize, because many of them might come in without knowing anything about HIV. So if they come to the point of the service provider and they meet that stigmatization, that might just be the end of it for them to even know anything about building resilience or even creating awareness or advocating for other people. So the essence of this research is actually to create that awareness and remind professionals that we actually have a task to make people self-actualize.